Alara raised her hand toward the soaring rafters and screamed the words that would either save the Empire or end her life. I invoke the right of challenge. The golden acoustics of the Spire of Unity carried her voice like a physical blow, silencing the gathered nobility and the hum of 1 billion live-stream viewers. Kalen froze, his hand inches from the binding stone, his face a mask of perfected Solari shock. Have you ever wondered if the walls around you were built for protection or to keep you from seeing the rot? If you want to see how deep the conspiracy goes, join us as we uncover the truth. Now the silence was total. A week ago, the hardest decision she had faced was whether to skip breakfast. The transition from rebellious princess to political pawn had been gradual, then sudden. The onyx circlet sat on a velvet cushion in her dressing room, its dark surface absorbing the morning light of Solaris. To anyone else, it was a priceless heirloom of the imperial line. To Alara, it felt like a heavy, suffocating shackle of duty. She traced the cold ridges of the stone, her reflection caught in its polished face. This marriage was the seal on a treaty meant to crush the Umbral hegemony, a necessity dictated by her father, Emperor Valerius. Rigid. That was the only word for the Solari court. The soldiers stood like marble statues, their armor gleaming with an identical, blinding luster. They moved in synchronized patterns, their breaths seemingly timed to the same metronome of tradition. But then there was the Terran. He stood near the perimeter of the gardens, a guard named Silas. He didn't stand still. His eyes constantly scanned the tree line, his fingers twitching toward a kinetic pistol that looked ancient compared to Solari energy blades. When a bird flared from a nearby bush, the Solari guards didn't blink. Silas flinched, his body coiled for a threat they were too honored to notice. In a room full of statues, look for the one man who was actually afraid. Alara found herself watching him during the rehearsal. While the high priest droned on about celestial alignment, Silas was inspecting the ventilation grates. He looked out of place, a ghost from a dead world surviving among the living gods of the Empire. He was the only person in the room who seemed to realize they were all mortal. Instinct is a strange thing. It often ignores the script we are given. The Terran's erratic behavior began to mirror the itch in Alara's own mind. She watched Kalen, her betrothed, through the lens of Silas's paranoia. Kalen was too perfect. His responses were too aligned with protocol. Even his smiles felt like they had been calibrated in a lab. 2 days before the wedding, she cornered Silas in a corridor. The man nearly leveled his weapon before recognizing her. He didn't bow. He just looked at her with eyes that had seen the end of a world. She asked him why he was so jumpy. Silas leaned in, the smell of cheap synthetic coffee and ozone clinging to him. He told her that on Earth, they learned that when the air gets too still, it's because a predator is holding its breath. He pointed toward the High Command's private wing. They aren't preparing for a wedding, he whispered. They're preparing for a takeover. Beneath the observation deck, something shifted. She had spent her life believing that honor was the highest calling. But as Silas spoke, she realized that honor is a luxury of the victors. Survival is the craft of the desperate. The Solari were so obsessed with the right way to rule that they had become blind to the effective way to betray. And now, in the Spire of Unity, under the silence of 300 species, she had finally done it. Alara's arm remained outstretched, her pulse thundering against her throat. Kalen's perfection had cracked, his jaw tight as he looked toward the High Command. He wasn't looking for support. He was looking for a signal. Valerius stepped forward, his robes of woven starlight rustling. The Emperor's eyes flicked to Silas, who had shifted his stance, his hand resting openly on his kinetic sidearm. In that moment, the Emperor saw what Alara saw, the only man in the room not acting. Valerius granted her 3 days. Silas was assigned as her shadow, a protector the court considered a dead man walking. The infiltration of Kalen's private estate was not a silent affair. Silas didn't believe in the Solari path of the unseen, which involved complex cloaking fields and synchronized movement. Instead, he moved with a terrifying, messy efficiency. He used a piece of Terran scav tech to short-circuit the perimeter sensors, creating a localized EMP that smelled of burnt ozone. Inelegant, Alara whispered as they crouched behind a marble fountain. Alive, Silas countered. Inside the vault, they didn't find wedding gifts. They found crates of umbral pulse mines and encryption keys that matched the hegemony's fleet signatures. The rite of challenge hadn't just been a dramatic outburst. It had been a surgical strike against a coup. Kalen found them there. He didn't come with guards. He came with an umbral shadow blade and a smile that finally reached his eyes, cold, hollow, and hungry. He explained that the Empire was a stagnant pond that needed to be drained. He moved with a speed that defied Solari physics, a blur of dark energy. Silas didn't try to match his grace. As Kalen lunged, the Terran dropped a magnesium flash charge directly at his own feet. The light was absolute, a scream of white that ignored the Solari's light-sensitive optics. While Kalen was blinded by his own biological superiority, Silas tackled Alara through a reinforced glass window. They fell 3 stories into the black water of the estate's canal. They had to move. The hegemony was already dropping from orbit, their ships appearing like ink blots against the stars. Silas led her through the maintenance tunnels, places no Solari noble had ever stepped. He taught her how to breathe through the burn of physical exhaustion, how to ignore the honor of a fair fight in favor of the glory of a narrow escape. The Solari fleet, usually rigid in their triangular formations, was being picked apart by the umbral swarm. Alara reached the comms hub, Silas at her back, his kinetic pistol barking in the rhythm of a man who refused to be a statue. She broadcasted the Terran tactical data, the messy, unpredictable, hit-and-run maneuvers Silas had used to keep them alive. She watched the golden ships of her people break formation. They stopped acting like a parade and started acting like predators. And in the aftermath, the spire of unity looked different. The smoke from the fallen umbral ships streaked the sky like war paint. Valerius stood on the dais, but he wasn't looking at the binding stone. He was looking at the first Terran diplomatic shuttle descending toward the plaza. Alara stood at the balcony's edge, the wind whipping her hair. The onyx circlet was in her hand, no longer a shackle. She turned it over, seeing the scratches it had earned in the tunnels. It was no longer a symbol of a static past, but a tool for a volatile future. She felt Silas move up beside her. He still smelled of ozone and sweat, and he was still scanning the horizon for threats. She didn't look for a script to follow. Instead, she let the silence of the new era ring out. The circlet caught the light of the rising suns, its weight finally feeling like something she had chosen to carry.